Thank you for joining us. This is Paul Wilson.
Chris Emke.
And you're listening to Diesel Performance Podcast. Chris, we made it through our big blowout sale. Guys, if you missed it, we were doing boost testers. We actually ran ourselves out of inventory on several of the components.
Yeah.
So we had to put a pause on that sale.
Yep.
You can still get a free tuned it hat if you mention the podcast.
There you go.
So if you call in and we're shipping anything out to you, we will still throw you a free tuned it hat. Just let your sales rep know that you listen to the podcast and Paul and Chris said it's okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right. Today we've got a lot of segments today, Chris. We have quite a full show for our listeners.
We do. I think, one of the meat of this, I think, was a really good timing because, as you mentioned, the promo, we released a couple of new products, one of them being the 2020 Plus Ford tuning. And man, dude, it's becoming very popular. There is such a demand for this. It's a really good product. Those trucks are super strong.
Yeah.
So we were talking like, hey, you know what? We did the ride-along on our 17 F-250 last week. Why don't we do a 2020 Plus ride-along? And who better to have than myself and one of the guys that works in our R&D department, Tim.
Yeah, well, Tim drives the truck.
It's his truck.
So we had to put him in.
Yeah.
No, but Tim's been on the show before, listeners.
Yep.
You guys have heard him talk about R&D and tuning in the past.
And we dived into that. We dived into the R&D. We talked about the comparison of a 17 and 19 with the 6 speeds versus the 2020s with the 10 speeds. And, I listening to him talk, experiencing the truck, driving it, it's a strong truck.
Yeah.
It's a strong truck.
It's tough to beat. We've
really
talked about
is.
it a lot
I know.
throughout the last couple years here and really heavily over the last few months. But yeah, it is for somebody who's a Duramax fan and yourself a Cummins fan, it's really hard to look at that and be like, wow.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
That's the bar.
Yeah.
That's the bar. That's the truck. That is the end all be all. Super, super impressed. Any of the Ford guys that are listening, kudos to you guys. They're badass trucks. I know for myself, I don't know if I can say, hey, I own a Ford. It's embarrassing to say, hey, I own a Cummins too, but it's what I like, right? It's what I like. But the Ford drives 1,000 times better than a Cummins
if you
tuned or
just
not.
like the big C, you could put whatever sticker you want.
I was thinking, I was trying to size it up so the big blue oval up front, and just one big C, you could do something. But
for Chris, you can
for
tell
Chris,
people that's for Chris.
My name's
not for Cummins.
My name's Chris.
Right.
What's wrong with you? Yeah. And then we have Jeremy and we have Sean Lynn on as well.
So Jeremy, I wanted to talk about this. So we brought on Super Tech Jeremy Garnett, who's got a great segment where we get to talk to him about what's going on in the shop and hear real life, real mechanic stories and kind of some of the trucks and troubleshooting and projects he works on here.
Yeah.
So we set aside the big Duramax Hummer conversion for right now because I get a ton of questions, Chris, around general maintenance. What oil should I run? What trans fluid should I run? What do I do what else do I do when I do an oil change? What maintenance should I do to keep my emissions equipment healthy?
Right. Smart
Those are great questions, and we get them all the time.
We get guys that'll call into the shop, hey, what oil do I run? Dude, I don't fuck. I run the oil that's in the 55-gallon drums in the shop.
Right. So I thought I'd talk to a guy who actually knows what's in that 55-gallon drum about it. So Jeremy breaks out a full-on detailed segment around just general maintenance. If you're going to bring, and I gave him the example, hey man, if I brought a newer LML with low miles to you and I said, hey, I just bought this truck or I just moved here and I don't have my service records, do an oil change in general maintenance, what would you do?
What is the general maintenance?
And so he kind of walked me through absolutely everything. And then our remote support expert, Sean Lynn, he came in and kills it talking about flashing LB7 and LLYs.
Man, those are... You would think LB7 LLYs, they're the first 2 generations of Duramaxes. They got to be easy. They got to be easy. And as you said that, I just cringed because those trucks suck to flash.
Yeah, because at best they're 15 years old.
Yeah.
So it's
Well, for the listeners, right, we're probably going to get into it more, but 15-year-old truck, the electronics subpar to today's standards, they're generally electrical nightmares. Even if you don't think they are, and that interferes.
Usually young guys have gotten a hold of them by now, and we're dealing with aftermarket stereos, aftermarket
underglow,
remote starts,
rock lights,
underglows,
oh God,
all
head
sorts
units,
of fun stuff.
You got it.
So Sean Lynn is a person who deals with these I think he said like 3 to 5 times a week minimum.
Yeah.
That he takes a call on flashing an LLY or LB7.
And you have to you have to decompose. But they're out there. We've all had them. We've all ran through these hurdles at one point in our lives or another.
I love it. Absolutely. So Sean Lane kills it. Guys, stick around. Right after a word from our sponsors, we're going to be back to you with the ride along, and we'll talk to our super tech and our remote support expert. Thank you so much for listening.
The XDP Extra Cool High Performance Coolant Additive enhances the performance of the cooling system in your vehicle. This coolant additive has been specially formulated to maximize the thermal transfer properties of your engine coolant to lower your temperatures. Not only does the Extra Cool additive reduce engine coolant temps, the premium additives in this formula prevent buildup and corrosion to extend the life of your cooling system and cooling system components. XDP Extra Cool Coolant Additive is safe for use in all cooling systems and is compatible with all types of coolant. To find out more about the XDP Extra Cool High Performance Coolant Additive, check out xdp.com or find a local dealer near you.
I want to talk to you listeners today a little bit about Worley Custom Fabrication. We've been working with the guys over at WC Fab since the shop is open, literally. We've always had a great friendship and relationship with Jason Worley and Ryan Worley and the whole crew over there. And one of the reasons that relationship has lasted for 15 years plus is because we get the same consistent high-quality parts and excellent customer service from them every time. If you guys are looking for any of the parts or products that WC Fab can supply, I blindly and wholeheartedly totally recommend them to you. Exergy Performance is the leader in high-performance diesel fuel systems. When you go around to UCC, when you go around to competitions, when you look at Levon Miller and other amazing competitors who have crushed it and dominated this space, you'll see consistently Exergy Performance is what their injectors and their fuel pumps are provided by. And that is because they're using the highest levels of technology to develop and process your orders. So you're not getting an injector that somebody hit with a screwdriver to hone it out. You're not getting something that some fly-by-night shop tried to tweak some 50-year-old equipment to try to hack together a set of modified injectors. You're getting OEM quality. You're getting the absolute best possible thing for your truck. And when it comes down to your fuel system in a diesel, there may be no part that's more crucial to have a very, very high, ridiculous standard for quality. If you're considering upgrading your fuel system in your diesel truck, you need to contact one of the distributors or you need to contact Exergy Performance directly because they're going to get the job done right and you're going to be really happy with it.
Hey guys, Chris Emke from Diesel Performance Podcast, and I'm joined with Tim Mahoney.
How you doing?
And today we are in a 2020 Ford F-250. For starters, I felt like it would be a really cool kind of follow-up. We did a ride-along last week in one of Calibrated Power's shop trucks, the 2017 Ford F-250 single-wheel regular cab. And I figured, this is the next generation of Power Strokes, being that the 2020s have a similar 6.7 Power Stroke engine, but they're mated with a 10-speed automatic. So Tim, you work over at Calibrated, you work in R&D and tuning and stuff like that. Tell me a little bit about this platform and what's some of the differences between the 20 pluses versus the 17 and 19 stuff.
Correct, yeah, Chris, this is a 2020. This is actually my truck, so I'm very familiar with the process and stuff of it. Had the truck about a year now, upgraded from a 19, very similar to the 17 you guys were driving last week. Yep. Pretty much main difference with the 2020 is right out the bat is, the no OBD flashing. Okay. So a little bit more of a process to tune. At the time I bought it, you really couldn't tune it at all. So we were able to put it on the dyno baseline and stuff like that. And then with any of these newer trucks, you're starting to get towards this 10-speed trans. You got the 10-speed in this, you got the 10-speed in the L5P. Yep. The Dodge isn't quite there yet. Rumors of that coming as well. Nice thing about this 10-speed is we can actually tune it. In the L5P, we can.
Okay. So as far as ECM, calibration, getting this thing to make some more power and, you know, just have some fun with it, are there a lot of differences between these and like a 17 to 19 truck calibration-wise?
Calibration-wise, no. As far as, you know, tuning it and your way around the configuration there, it's all very similar. 2020's got a little bit smaller turbo. They pack a punch from the factory.
They're really responsive.
Very responsive, good power delivery. This truck with 300 miles on it, dynoed 430, which I thought was very impressive at the time. Now that it's got some miles on it, actually dynos about 460, 470 stock to the wheel, where your 19 Power Stroke was, I think, 390-ish, right around 400. So, but they do have that smaller turbo, so that's where I don't want to say we're at a disadvantage tuning it, but just the headroom wasn't quite as heavy as we're used to. But that also, it makes up for it in that drivability, that responsiveness, that torque, you know, the ability to pull is, I think, where this truck really does shine.
A couple of things that I noticed driving this, kind of like those first impressions, is, you know, if we talk a 17 and 19 truck, I think they're very snappy, very responsive. There's no secret that I've always said, like, Ford's kind of like that most complete truck, even though it'd be hard for me to say I own a Ford. That's just my personal opinion. But the 17, 19s, they're very responsive. They shift very nicely. And then in 2020, some of the companies went to a 10-speed, like you had mentioned. The L5P 2020 Plus are 10 speeds for the automatics, and then the Fords also go to a 10-speed.
Yep.
What do you think some of the advantages and disadvantages of the 10-speed are from an OEM's perspective?
I mean, the advantages of the 10-speed, very simple, right? So you're always kind of in that sweet spot of that RPM window, but at the same time, you can stay in that nice RPM window when you're on the highway. You're not overworking the truck. So towing abilities, that stuff, fuel economy, all that comes up, right? So a lot to do with the 10-speed is, in my opinion, is obviously fuel economy and economics there. As far as a tuning standpoint, or as far as a driver when you're trying to add power, or someone who's, you know, we have aggressive customers, right? That are just, they want a truck, they want it to snap, they want it to be, you know, your LBZ and Allison just pop through gears. Yep. 10-speed trans isn't set up like that from the factory at all.
A lot of moving from what I'm feeling.
It's a lot of moving parts. It's you know, you have a lot of different shift patterns and all that. So from a tuning perspective, it's actually pretty difficult to get the power to the ground, because as you add that power, the trans just becomes less and less familiar with what it's doing, and it really does get confused. And it took us, you know, we've been able to tune the trans since I bought the truck, so that's actually what we started tuning first. And it took, I mean, even this week I made a change in our standard trans file, which I'm really happy with. But you start getting into skip shifts and stuff like that, and where to add where to add pressure, how much pressure, what gears to skip, stuff like that, and wide open throttle, and the truck could either get really happy or it could get really confused.
One of the things that, you know, just driving this, and again, you know, just to kind of clear the air, the 10-speed, you didn't gain 3 final drives or overdrives, right? That never changed. They cut up like your second gear, third gear, fourth gear, and multiply those gears. Again, keeping that engine in its sweet spot, like you mentioned. So when you're driving the truck normal, you never really see the RPM drop. You don't see that RPM drop for, you know, gear transition, but I just have to go and assume that this thing's got to be a monster towing. Like, this thing's got to be super happy towing, keeping the engine, once again, kind of in its torque curve. Have you towed with the truck, and kind of what are some of the comparisons from, you know, someone that's looking at potentially buying a newer truck, comparing the 6-speed to the 10-speed from a towing aspect?
Yeah, so I've towed with this truck. I towed it out to Colorado with my enclosed trailer. As far as power ability, stuff like that, I mean, it's awesome going up through the mountains and stuff. We tow to about 10,500, 11,000 feet. This truck has no lack of power, even in stock form. One thing unique I found about this truck was kind of in its EGT operating range. If you're above about 750 degree EGT, the truck will just passive regen all the time, which is similar to what you would be with like your Cummins stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like they took that out of the Cummins handbook.
Exactly, but that wasn't how the previous year Fords were, and that isn't how the Duramax is still to this day. But as far as keeping the truck in a happy operating window, I mean, this 10-speed does it well. As far as the truck itself towing, I was a little unhappy with it when I first switched from my 19. it just, I think a lot to do with it was is the Tremor model. My 19 was like the standard 250. So I did actually add airbags as far as just to kind of help with the heavier loads. But we do, I mean, Nick will mess around. He'll take his big tractor out with it. I mean, the gooseneck's been on here a ton, and I've been really happy with that. When you pop it in tow haul, again, you can kind of mess with those shift points and figure out what gears you want to skip and what ones it'll really hold up well in.
I want to point that out too. So on that turn that we just did back there, I blimped into the throttle probably about 50%. I saw it go 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 10. Mm-hmm. So is that in a calibration? Does the factory offer skip shifts? What is that? I guess what is the end all be all for deciding when the skip shift is going to occur?
It's really up to drivability, and I guess you got to kind of balance the power with what gears you're skipping and stuff like that.
Okay.
The factory calibration does allow skip shifting in your normal driving modes.
Okay.
But it also has, the 10 speeds also uses torque logic similar to like what's in my wife's 3.0 Explorer ST and the EcoBoost and stuff, where it'll actually shift up and shift down based on your torque output, which in my opinion is actually kind of frustrating from a calibrator point of view, because you're telling the trans to do something and the truck is looking at the torque input and it's doing something different.
Gotcha.
So I'm actually a big fan of in this truck, it's turned off right now. So basically, whatever shift schedule I tell it to be in, that's what it is. That's what it's following.
Gotcha.
The torque logic, or whatever you want to call that, turned on is very nice when you're towing, because you know it'll if the truck wanted to downshift but the shift schedule isn't telling it to, it would allow the truck to downshift.
Okay.
So there's pluses and minuses to both. We've made, I think, 3 different trans files that we make available to the customer now, so you kind of get to pick and choose. I mean,
Gotcha.
The one that's in here right now, I have no problem towing with, but I would consider it our most aggressive
Gotcha.
trans file.
So you had mentioned when you first got the truck, you had baselined the truck. We'll just kind of go as a happy medium, right? And we'll say that the truck makes about 450 wheel horsepower stock. What kind of power can you get out of one of these reliably? Stock turbo, stock fuel system, that kind of thing.
So the original, or that first 80 to 100 horsepower was super easy to make. When the truck baselined at 430 and we were able to flash it, I was making 520, 530 pretty easily.
Okay.
That next, I would say 40 or 50 horsepower was where it took months in R&D and development to kind of figure out.
Now, is that the power plant? Is that just kind of some of those outcomes from the smaller turbocharger? Like,
smaller turbocharger, and keep in mind here, there's no OBD flashing, right? So you don't have HP tuners that already took this ECM or this map pack and mapped it out for you, right? So you can't just open up BFI Live and they give you, hey, here are the 30 maps you need to play with.
Yeah.
Or I can't just open it up and compare. I mean, this is all done in binary and what we call like back-end work. So,
okay.
That part I think is the most difficult, is finding torque limiters, hunting all that stuff down while keeping everything we know about air-fuel ratio happy,
It's crazy to me to think about, I think about the earlier 6.7s, and I think about, a lot of the trucks that we play with, a lot of the older Cummins, the Duramaxes over the years, and what it would take to get to, 550 to 600 wheel horsepower.
Yeah.
And we just took that turn over there and I got into the throttle a little bit, man. This thing just clips gears, it stays in its rev range, right? It stays in its torque curve, and it just keeps you held back in the seat. It's insane to me to think that this is what we are dealing with in the year of 2020 plus when we talk about these trucks and what their real capabilities are.
Yeah, I mean, what's quite impressive to me, if you want to tow with an LLY, LBZ, even older Ford, like if you want to get up and go, like you're in the throttle, it's either off and on. And this thing's more fun at 50, 60, 70% throttle, just that little goose around somebody. And then, if you want to get into it, you'll get into it.
Oh, no, that... These things, what kind of mileage do you generally average on something like this?
It's at 15.5 right now. I think I actually kind of surprised Nick. We took this down to UCC, and he probably wasn't happy about how fast we were going, but we're probably doing 85, 90 mile an hour, in and out. Probably average about 85 mile an hour.
On the good old Interstate 65, right?
Yeah, bump it along there. And we did 17.5, 17.6 miles to the gallon round trip. We drove down there and back the same day. Like it was a quick 10-hour trip, 12-hour trip, and he was really impressed. stock, this truck, I would say, driving around town, I got about 13.5. Right now, as you look at it, I mean, I got probably over 1,000 miles on this trip. You're at 15.5, which is, you know, we always tell customers, like, we don't advertise power or mileage gains, right? But like sometimes they do come with it. For how I drive, they usually don't come with it, right? Like if I can maintain mileage,
you're in the throttle
horsepower,
50-60%. You know, you're having fun with it.
So if I can maintain the same mileage and gain 100 horsepower, I'm all for it. On this truck, we were actually able to pick up mileage and that, which, you know, was impressive to me. I mean, not for someone who's really looking for mileage, but you know, pickup truck that I can drive every day, haul with, whatever, and get 15, 17 miles to the gallon.
It's home run. We're going to turn here. We're going to get into it, right? So I'm going to beat on your truck with permission.
Yep.
So pull out here and that skip shift. That's wild.
So it gets up and goes. I mean, it's still shifting.
That was a nice back road in Mexico, you know, the 20 to 90 pull, 20 to 100 pull.
These things are really happy at that 40, 50 to 80. You know, like for us, it's 90, right? Like you're cruising on 90, you want to get around somebody. Yeah. It loves that quick downshift to 6th, 7th gear, get around somebody.
Now on the type of power output that we're talking about, you know, 550 to 590 horsepower, what kind of torque are these things making rear wheel wise?
I think we cut it right around 1,300 foot-pounds.
1,300 foot-pounds to the rear tire.
Yeah, so right, I mean, that was, you know.
And that's what you're feeling in that 50% throttle input, that toe.
Yeah, you're feeling that torque. I mean, you're in the meat of that torque at that 1,900 RPM, and the weird thing about the factory cal in these was I think it made peak power around 2,200, which is a little bit low for where peak horsepower usually is. And by 2750, the truck was actually down like 300, down to 370 horse. So it's a 50, 60 horsepower loss between 2300 and 2700. Wow. So what we were actually able to do in the calibration was maintain that power increase. So yeah, it's 125, 130 horse over stock peak, right? But at 2,700 RPM, we're actually able to add more like 150, 160.
Oh, wow. Well, do you have anything else that you would want to bring up about the truck that I didn't ask?
Not really. I'm super happy with it. I don't think I will, you know, usually as calibrators, right, we order the next year truck or whatever. Yeah. I don't know what's going on. I'm not ready to go get a new truck, I guess is what I'm saying.
Trucks that drive like this, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, we hope you enjoyed that ride along. Stay tuned. We're going to have our Super Tech segment with Jeremy Garnett. We have our customer support expert, Sean Lynn. They're going to be coming back at you with their segments and some more information to come. So stay tuned.
Have a good one, guys.
All right, folks, I'm here with our favorite super tech, Jeremy Garnett. Jeremy, how the hell are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for asking. Jeremy, we've gone through a lot of really cool troubleshooting with you and talking about trucks that you've dealt with in the shop, and I want to hit you today with something just a little bit different.
Okay.
All right, so I get a lot of questions around general maintenance, and I have a habit of like quickly passing over this stuff because it's not super interesting to me, because I, like many customers out there, like to take my truck to the same shop forever and have them do all of the maintenance, and I don't have to think about it. And it's just, I know by the mileage on my truck, it's time to go back to the shop and drop it off. Right. And that's it. So what if I had a 2016 LML Duramax and I got like 50,000 miles on it because I never drive the thing, and say I just moved here. So I used to live down south. I just moved up to this area, and now I need a new shop to do all of my maintenance.
Right.
I come in and I say, hey, you know what? I know it needs an oil change, but I don't really know anything else. Like, can you guys just do an oil change and all the regular maintenance on the truck?
Sure.
What would that entail for you then as the tech?
Well, that's what I would actually get, is I would actually get a service ticket, and it would have an oil change on it, and then it would say general check over, maintenance check over, wellness check.
Right.
Tell me the wellness, what you think, how the truck is and how it responds and drives. So that's what I would do, is I would actually pull it in. I would do the oil change first, do a basic look over of the truck, and first test, I'd boost test it. I don't care how many miles, just 10,000 miles or 150,000. I'm going to boost test it. I'm going to do the oil change. I'm going to generally look it over. I'm going to look at the brakes, start looking at the fluids.
Let's break that down a little bit. So when you look at the brakes, are you pulling the caliper off and looking at the pads? What does a brake inspection entail?
Well, here it's these things have actually the bigger wheels on it. So they might have a stock set of wheels that has, let's say it's an LML. It has 18 or 20-inch wheels on it. So you can actually get a pretty good look at the brakes without pulling it apart.
Okay.
If it's going to need brakes, then I'm going to start pulling it apart and checking the calipers, stuff like that, and see if we actually have to go some a little bit more than just brake pads.
Okay, gotcha.
So, but yeah, we'll just do a general inspection. I mean, if it has 50, 60%, 80% on the brakes, they look good. They look good.
They're good. Okay. Yeah. And then we talked about fluids. Mm-hmm. Jeremy, I can't tell you how many listeners care a lot about what fluids. And if you've ever been on a forum or a Facebook group, there's so many questions about what oil should I run, what trans fluid should I run. Let's just do the rundown here. So you're doing an oil change. Let's start with the fluid. What oil do you put back in the truck? Well, what's your preference?
Here we use a mobile Delvac. That's exactly what they use at GM. They use a mobile product. I mean, most GM dealerships do.
Yeah.
It's what we use, what we've had luck with, and it's an all-around good product. It's a mobile Delvac. It's a semi-synthetic oil, and we use nothing but GM oil filters.
Okay, good. That was my next question, was like everybody wants to talk about filters and oil filtration, fuel filtration, all this. So just the standard, same thing you would get at the dealership, that's what we're going to take a look at. Yeah,
I mean, it's, GM has good luck with them. We have great luck with them. We've never had an issue, so for 50 cents, why buy something from Napa or CarQuest or Advanced Auto or AutoZone? It's like, why would I buy that product when a GM filter is 50 cents more, and we buy them by 10, 12, 20 at a time, but it's for the price. It's
hard to beat.
It's hard to beat.
So you might spend just a little bit more money comparatively, but it's not so much more that it's going to make or break your decision.
Right.
Exactly. Like you drive a diesel. Right. Let's get real about it. Okay. The other fluid everyone wants to talk about is trans fluid. Stock trans, built trans, do you run a different fluid? Does it matter?
No. We run, and highly suggested to run, just a full synthetic fluid. Make sure it's just it's a Dex 6 capable, so all GMs is just Dextron 6. 90% of your synthetic fluids are going to be Dextron 6.
Right.
And if it's multi-fluid, or multi-vehicle, not saying multi-fluid, multi-vehicle, it is usually a synthetic fluid is a multi-vehicle.
Okay.
And if you're really that curious, just look at the back of it, and it'll actually tell you which vehicle that'll work on. Most containers will actually tell you it doesn't matter brand as long as it is a Dex 6 or a full synthetic fluid.
Gotcha. So you don't spend the extra money on the really fancy stuff. I'm not going to call any brands out by name, but...
Nope. If it's going to break down, it's going to break down. And we have them in 1,200, 1,300 horsepower trucks, and we have them in 500 horsepower trucks. We run the same fluid,
right?
And trans is going to break. It's going to break.
Yeah, it's not going to break because of the fluid.
No,
that's not unless you really fucked up, like put way too much or way too little in. You're not going to cause.
The only time it's ever going to cause a problem is if you have 150,000 miles on it and you've never touched the fluid and it's brown and clutch metal and clutch material all in the fluid, and just you look in the pan and it's all gritty. I mean, yeah, then you got a problem. But
then you're right. Then you have a problem that's not fluid related. Exactly. What that's going to mean is that once we pull the fluid out and put new fluid in it, things are not going to play well.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Engine oil, trans fluid checked. It's an LML. We're going to boost test it.
Yep.
Assuming it's got the stock filter. I know Nick is real big on that filter minder.
Oh yeah.
Now you check the filter minder, I take it.
Yeah. And then actually I actually get a physical look at the filters as well. I mean, if a truck can't breathe properly, it's not going to run properly.
That's it.
I mean, turbo, it needs air. Needs to get rid of air, needs air. So air filter, man, it's just if you have an S&B or any other intake or a stock intake, air filter, man, that's the first thing to look at.
It's so easy too. I mean, it's so simple that like if you're at home and you're like, When's the last time I checked my air filter? Bro, just hit the next gas station, pop the hood, and check the air filter.
Well, that's another thing we could actually touch on too. Is like, okay, K&N or I'm not, wet filters compared to dry filters.
Oh yeah, oiled filters. One of my favorite topics.
Exactly. I mean, here, I personally don't like wet filters, or I prefer dry filters.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's wet around here sometimes, it's dry around here sometimes, but we're on a lot of dirt roads.
Sure.
I don't want dirt sticking to oil or a wet filter.
So two big problems with oiled filters in my experience. Number one is that you're likely going to suck some of that oil through and skew your mass airflow sensor.
Definitely, 100%.
So that's like really, really common issue. Number two is that even if that doesn't happen, which I've had other guys debate with me over whether or not that happens. It happens, but whatever. The other problem is, like you mentioned, if that you have a lot of dust, you have a lot of dirt floating around, you have a lot of that stuff's going to end up under the hood. It just is. And as it sticks to oil, it then becomes cake and like unpassable concrete oil cake on your intake, which is like pretty much running a Wally mod.
Right. So I had a customer. He had a beautiful, just absolutely one of the most beautiful LMLs I've seen. He travels from Illinois to Florida, and he travels a trailer down there and home. That's all he does. And then it's a 15,000-pound trailer. He comes in, says my check engine lights comes on when I tow my trailer. Okay, I'll open the hood. It's got a K&N wet filter in it, and we tell him, look, put a dry filter in it, put a stock filter in it, all your issues will be taken care of. He did not believe us.
Yeah.
He called us up. He was actually in Florida and said, my check engine light came on. Put a filter in it. He put a filter in it, drove all the way home. Never had an issue.
Never, yep. Amazing.
Never, ever had an issue. The truck couldn't breathe enough, and the mass airflow was freaking out.
Yeah.
And it was throwing a check engine light when he was hitting, going up the hills, big mountains.
Absolutely.
Towing 15,000 pounds.
And that's all it takes, man.
Yep.
That's all it takes. And a lot of guys, you know how a lot of guys are. They see the check engine light and they go into panic mode immediately. Yeah. They're not even like, oh, this is probably something stupid. I didn't tighten the gas cap enough or whatever. Guys lose their mind over it. So okay. So that's really good advice. All right. So we covered the boost leaks, so we always boost test them. We check the intakes. We check the air filters. We check the oil. When you're pulling oil filters off, is there any indicators, like early indicators, that I might be having a problem? Or is it like pull the oil filter off, throw it away, put a new one on? We're not wasting our time looking at an oil filter. I know trans filter's a little bit different. But
trans is a little bit different because, you have a actual magnet inside it. And another thing is how many transmissions we do. If you're going to change that filter, make sure you clean that magnet off and put it back in.
Thank you.
Because, I'd say 50% of the cords we get in, that magnet's missing. Like, come on, guys. It's just put that magnet back in. It's there for a reason. But oil, I just make sure it's not sludgy and stuff like that. You could diesel oil. You can change your oil and 2 minutes later it's already black.
Right.
So it's hard to tell, but you can tell when it's sludgy or
Yeah, the consistency, the viscosity of it. That's more notable than anything else when it comes to oil, right?
But other than that, it's change your oil.
What about? So I get guys that say, "What maintenance should I do to keep my emissions equipment healthy?" Now, I know I'm a big one on boost test your truck regularly. So MK's big on every other oil change. If you're really diligent about oil changes, that works.
Right.
If you're a little bit more lax in that department, just boost test your truck every oil change. It's not hard.
Right.
And you should have a stealth boost test kit anyways for your truck. So should be really easy to do at home. So you boost test it. That's number one. Boost leaks will destroy emissions equipment, EGRs and DPFs specifically. A boost leak will wreak havoc on them. But when it comes to DEF, there's not much, man. Run good DEF fluid.
I run good DEF fluid. Make sure the cap's on. Because air does. The DEF doesn't like air. It'll make you tell if they've run enough DEF fluid, the crystallization around the actual
tank,
the tank
the
and
fill
stuff like
top,
that, the fill top. That actually will happen inside the tank as well if the cap's left loose.
Sure.
The fluid's too low for too long. I don't suggest topping it off all the time. I suggest running it down and just a little bit every once in a while, just so you get fresh fluid in there.
Yeah, that's such a tough one for guys to really wrap their head around. They're like, man, I never run the truck under a quarter tank of fuel or under a half a tank of fuel, and I'm like, I get it, but with DEF, we need to use it all up and then put new shit in there.
Right.
That's what it comes down to.
It's hard. I know some CTSs, like CTS 2s and 3s, actually give you a mileage counter or distance, how much DEF is left. I know GM's really bad at not giving you a gauge. Some of the newer trucks actually tell you how long you have.
Sure.
But I wish it was like a Dodge or a Cummins. It'd be like, actually has a fuel gauge for the DEF tank. But
yeah, let you know where you're at. Yeah.
Yeah.
GM likes to just keep you guessing.
Yeah, GM,
just stay on your toes. All right, good, man. Any other tips or tricks if you got a guy who's going to do their oil change and fluid service change all at home?
So I would recommend checking and making sure that your T-case. So especially in an early model, a lot of guys are still running their LB7s, LYs, LBZs.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of guys, out there. We just had one the other day. Guy came in for a transmission. I do the transmission. I always drain the fluid in the T-case. T-case is empty. So it happens more than you actually think. It's if not, it's very low, and the fluid is just brown. That would be one fluid that I would change more often than not, or at least
that's interesting.
Check. Yeah. It's interesting. Nobody ever thinks about their transfer case, but
yeah. Well, once it breaks, sure.
Exactly. It's just we run just normal transmission fluid in it. They actually make, the special, fluids in some cases. Like I know in the LMLs we run the actual, like a Tech 4. I can't remember the exact name of it. But we run just, normal Deck 6 synthetic transmission fluid in it, and we do that in our pole trucks or everyday trucks, and they run fine.
No issues.
No issues.
I like that. Awesome, man. Well, excuse me. Sorry, listeners. That's a really good pro tip. That I think that's going to be a nice one for guys to be like, there's another kind of whoops reminder of like, man, it has been like 12 oil changes since I've actually looked in my transfer case. So like a lot of guys out there, like you said, have never even looked in it.
Right.
That's a good one, man. That's one of those thinkers that I'm sure there's somebody listening right now that's like, oh, should I?
Yeah, and then make sure, if you've read enough forums, you've read enough, you hear enough, you see videos, but they rub through the pump rub.
Yeah.
They do rub through. That's a whole nother topic we can run on, but it's, try to prevent some of that and make sure it is full. So you're not replacing an $1,800, transfer case. You can, just fill the fluid.
Yeah. Good call, man. Good call. Excellent. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for stopping by.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Listeners, stick around. We're going to have our remote support expert, Sean Lynn, coming at you next. Listeners, I'm so excited to have our remote support expert, Sean Lynn, in the office. Sean, how the hell are you?
Great. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for asking. Sean, things have been hopping over at Duramax Tuner Calibrated Power, where you're on the phones every day helping people solve all sorts of different problems with their diesel trucks, EcoBoost, tractors, and everything else that we deal with at the shop. And I know one of the common problems that, since I have been on the phones here back in 2013, has always been LB7 and LLY ECM flashing. Do you still run into that? Do you still take a lot of phone calls on that topic?
Absolutely. I would say at least 2 or 3 phone calls a day on them.
Oh, wow. Okay. So number one, if you have an LB7 or LLY, yes, we can tune your truck. We do it regularly, very, very clearly here. But with those, there's some inherent issues. Now, these are the 01 to 05 Duramaxes. We don't run into a lot of ECM flashing issues with anything newer, right?
Yeah, for some reason, the older trucks just seem to... Some of them work fine, and other ones just don't want to cooperate.
That's literally all I can tell you about it. Is I couldn't tell you like, oh, some LB7 ECMs are bad, and this is how you can tell early on. It's like, no, you're not going to know until you actually try to flash it.
Right.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let's walk our listeners through it. What are some of the most common problems? What do people call you and start to ask you? Where are they at when you get involved?
Well, it's usually something along the lines of losing communication between the port and the ECM itself, the truck's computer. Very common, especially with aftermarket electronics. Interferences happen, and then the flash doesn't go through.
Oof. What's the code that comes up on EFI Live with that? It's a $.
0502 0333 usually.
Yep. 0333. So $0333. If you're using EFI Live, like an AutoCal or a Spade from us, that's going to be security code, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
And 0502 is no communication.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Security code, that could indicate that the truck has been previously flashed by another tuner.
It could either be that or something on the truck is blocking the communication, just making it think the security is stopping it from reading.
Yeah.
Or writing.
Yeah, aftermarket remote starts used to be real notorious for that. There used to be one wire that would run up under the column, and if you disconnected that wire, you could flash, and if you didn't, you were stuck.
Yeah, between the aftermarket stereos, integrated steering wheel controls, especially remote start, that's probably the biggest one, and then other stuff just causes the data lines to become busier than they already are.
That's right. What's something people could do to try to prevent that?
Yeah, so we go through it all the time, like you were saying before, but pretty much we have a list of fuses under the hood that we have customers pull. And lift pump relay. Some guys got lift pumps on their trucks, obviously.
Sure.
And then the remote start, sometimes that's the make or break right there.
That's it. Yeah, I know I've had guys unplug the head unit and completely remove the head unit, like actual wiring harness, to be able to get it to flash. Remote start, that is, like, I wouldn't go disconnect my remote start first. I do all the fuses first. I would do, the unplug every electronic, make sure nothing's communicating with the truck. Don't roll your windows up or down. Don't turn your radio on. Like, don't whisper too loud while you're flashing, right?
The truck's communication lines are like a highway, and it's like a highway at rush hour when you try to flash it sometimes.
I like that. It's a good analogy. Okay, great. So we have a list of things you can try to do to troubleshoot around that. What happens if we go through all of that and it's still not working?
When all else fails, pretty much the ultimate solution is to have the ECM sent into us here to bench flash, and 9 out of 10 times it'll go through no problem. And the other possible scenario there is the ECM is locked. 0537 means it's locked with a custom key, and this typically means that the previous owner tuned the truck and never brought it back to stock, and we see that pretty often.
Yeah, okay. Bench flash, just in case you guys don't know, a bench flash is when we actually have a harness that goes like from our computer here at work, like our laptop or our tower, and we have a little harness that actually mounts directly to an ECM. That way there is no truck anything involved. It's literally the tuning, it's the computer to the tuning device directly to the actual ECM itself. So it's perfectly direct communication. It's not possible for anything else to interrupt it. So if a flash is ever going to work, it has to work in a bench flash. There's nothing else there to screw it up. However, yeah, man, there still might be some of those out there where again, somebody flashed it. EFI Live, especially like older versions of EFI Live, locks were real tricky. Locking and securing your files to make sure nobody else could read your files out as a custom tuner. That was a big hubbub with EFI Live for several years. So because of that, there's different updates out there and different times that it's been done. But anyways, what happens is a tuner flashes your ECM, so the tuner puts a tune on the truck, and they protect their files so that nobody else can read it out and steal all their calibrations with one of these locks, these custom locks or a custom key. The challenge is then that if you don't go back to that original tuner who has the original, somewhat original hardware, or at least original serial number, to unlock it, your ECM is locked forever. There is no way around it, period. In those situations, you got to buy a new ECM. If you can't get back to your original tuner, that's the only path that we end up with.
We do actually have another method that's worked out pretty good for us lately, especially the LB7 guys. Basically, SoCal Diesel has an ECM service for $175, and they replace the possibly faulty chip in your ECM, and then they can unlock it and flash whatever on it, and it'll basically be like brand new again.
That's nice.
And the fact that these things are so hard to find now, especially for LB7s, that's the way to go.
Yeah, for sure, man. I remember sitting there going through car-parts.com trying to call junkyards for one ECM at a time, and you just pray to God it gets here and it's not actually an LS controller.
I had a customer buy he did it on his own, but he bought a brand new one from O'Reilly's, and they spent $1,200 on it.
Oof.
And I got it here, and it was crashed.
Oh.
And so I had to go through them to warranty it, but he spent $1,200 on it.
That's so brutal. That's so brutal. And it's so logical, too, because if you're that guy and you're like, well, I have a part and I need to replace it, I will go to the parts store and buy a part. Done, right? Like that makes total sense. But that's one of those, man, where doing a little more research or being an enthusiast, that could help a lot.
I couldn't believe he spent that much on it. You know, the trucks are 15 plus years old now. I mean,
the truck's worth $5,500. He spent $1,200 on an ECM, and then told it's crashed, and you got to get. Oh, that's hard. That's a hard call to make.
I'm just glad that there's companies out there that actually remanufacture these and don't charge you a fortune to do it. You know,
that's the truth of it, right there. Excellent. Well, Sean, any pro tips for guys out there just flashing their trucks, their LB7s or LLYs?
Yeah, I would say the first thing you want to do is hook up a battery tender, because a lot of times when you try to flash the truck, if the ECM doesn't see around 12.6 volts, it could potentially fail because of that. And I know it sounds stupid. You got 2 batteries in the truck, I understand, but this has literally gotten me through when people could not flash their trucks.
Good pro tip, man. That's such an easy one to skip over. I'll be honest, I've flashed, I don't know, a couple hundred trucks in my life, and maybe I have hooked up the battery tender twice, and only in dire need. So please don't be me, be Sean. Hook the battery tender up before you flash it the first time, not once you have a problem. Save yourself a lot of headaches.
And then as far as the aftermarket electronics are concerned, there's a radio fuse under the hood, radio amp, ABS, info, and HVAC that you should pull as well as your lift pump relay if you have one.
Nice. Good details there, Mr. Len. Good details.
I go through it a lot.
That's why you're our remote support expert. Sean Len, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Listeners, stick around. Chris and I will be wrapping up this show in just a moment. Chris, I had a lot of fun putting this show together.
What a jam-packed episode
Really
with good information.
It really was. It's you know, sometimes
you come through once in a while.
Well, sometimes we have a lot of fun and we get to talk to somebody who's really excited, but we really only hone in on that one topic.
Right.
And today I thought it was a lot of fun kind of putting everything together and hearing you and Tim out driving a truck in the real world and getting some really solid stuff out of our super tech and our remote support expert. Mm-hmm. Guys, check out DuramaxTuner.com, WCFab.com, ExergyPerformance.com, or XDP.com, who carries all of our brands. If you want to find out any more about the products that we talked about today, for right now, this has been Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
Thanks for listening.
My name's Chris. Like,
right.
What's wrong with you? Yeah.